Just before we begin, we're going to have a reading from Psalm 126, and Mike is just going to come forward and read that psalm for us.
Psalm 126, a song of ascents. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said amongst the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. Restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seeds to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you again. This morning we're going to be going through Psalm 126 that Mike kindly read for us there. We're going to be exploring this theme in the Psalm of restoration specifically. And this psalm is one psalm that makes up a group called a Song of Ascents. And perhaps you recall me speaking on Psalm 121, which is another one of these psalms. It has those words, I lift my eyes up to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of the heavens, and we explored that. And today we're looking at Psalm 126, and this is the seventh of the 15 Song of Ascent psalms. These psalms that would have been sung as the pilgrims and as the people went up the hill to the temple to experience God's presence and experience the presence of the Lord. They would be going to worship Him, and they would be singing these psalms specifically, this group of psalms, as they went. So that is what we are looking at and exploring today. Well, I want to start just by telling you a story, reading you a story from this book, which is a devotions book on the book of Psalms. And it reads, "A judge has ordered a German man to stop bursting into laughter in the woods. Joachim Barenfeld, an accountant, was taken to court by one of several joggers who say their runs have been disturbed by Barenfeld's deafening squeals of joy. He faces up to 6 months in jail if he is caught again. Barenfeld, 54, says he goes to the woods to laugh nearly every day to relieve stress. It is part of living for me, he says, like eating, drinking and breathing. He feels that a cheerful heart, expressed through hearty laughter, is important to his health and survival. A merry heart is vital in life. Proverbs 17:22 says, a cheerful heart is good medicine. A happy heart affects our spirit and our physical health. But there is a deeper, abiding joy for those who trust the Lord that is based on more than circumstances. It is a joy based on God's salvation. He has provided forgiveness of sin and a restored relationship with Himself through His Son, Jesus. That gives us a deep joy that circumstances cannot shake." So, a slightly amusing story there about the man who goes to the woods to laugh and he's been banned from the woods. I searched this story up separate to this book and found it a couple times online, but I couldn't actually find the man, a picture of the man. I couldn't find the original source, so I'm not 100% sure it's even true, that story, but it's interesting nevertheless. This book makes that really interesting and powerful point about restoration, about that we've been restored to Christ, and that's what we're just thinking about this morning. So that word restoration, So restoration means to renew or to bring back to its original state. So we might use it when talking about the restoration of a building, perhaps a historical building that's having some type of repair work done to bring it back to its former glory. The guys there are up on scaffolding using probably certain techniques, similar materials to what the building was made out of, and they're restoring the building to its original form. We may also use this word in thinking about our identity. If we have a difficult crisis in our lives and then we get back to feeling like ourselves, we might say, I feel restored. We might also experience restoration in our relationships, in perhaps, if we have a falling out with someone, a friend, and if we are having a difficult time in a marriage, we might find that we experience restoration in that marriage, and the people come back together in a way that they were perhaps once before. Perhaps we experience restoration in peace in our lives, in times that peace leaves and comes back. And we might say, I feel that my peace has been restored, or my purpose has been restored, or my dignity has been restored. So those are some ways that we would use this word and some explanation of what this word means. We would use this word when we think of being saved and experiencing salvation. When we think of our faith in Christ and that faith in Jesus and that grace of him dying on the cross, putting our trust in him and receiving this free gift of salvation, we would say, well, we've experienced restoration in the sense that we were intended to have a relationship with God, and because of the fall, because of sin, because of lots of things that went wrong in the book of Genesis, we needed to be restored, and Jesus has brought that restoration in our lives. And we are restored, we experience God's renewal as we move forward with him in a new way. So those are some examples of restoration and the word. And let's just unpack the first verse here of the psalm. It reads, "When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed." And that word Zion essentially means Jerusalem. It means the people of God at that time. So when the Lord restored the fortunes of his people, of the people of Judah, actually at that time, we were like those who dreamed. And those people needed restoring, specifically because they had been attacked and they had been taken over. King Nebuchadnezzar had come, he besieged Jerusalem, he took them as captives, and he took them to Babylon, and they were there for 70 years. So when this psalmist is writing, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, he's talking of the freedom that came from them being taken out of captivity. And some different translations word it slightly differently to say, when the Lord restored the captives to Zion. And so he's talking about the people being freed from bondage, from slavery, and taken home. And saying, we were like those who dreamed. I wonder if you've ever had a dream. When you were a young person or a child, did you have a dream? Was there something that you wanted to be when you grew up? If you think back now, was there something that maybe there's something that comes to mind now? What did you want to be when you were a young person? Go on, Sue. What? You wanted to fly, as in be a pilot or have a superpower? Either or both. You wouldn't have been fussy. You wanted to fly. Okay. That's a great answer. That's a great answer. How about anyone else? Does anything come to mind for anyone? Go on, Jill.
Ballet dancer.
You wanted to be a ballet dancer. Okay. I thought I had to ask you twice then, just for the pronunciation of ballet. I wasn't sure if you said ballet or belly then, so I'm glad I clarified that. Anyone else over here? What did you want to be, JP?
I wanted to be a veterinary surgeon.
A veterinary surgeon. That's very
I
specific.
used to watch all creatures great and small.
All creatures great and small. That's wonderful. Thank you, JP. So we all can relate to that, can't we? Of that experience of dreaming. For me, I loved football when I was a young person. I would dream of being a football player. This player here is called Alano, and he's a Brazilian player. He had a great strike, and I love this guy. I'd be running around the playground going, Alano, you know, shooting the ball, and this was a guy who I really liked, and I wanted to be a footballer. For you, it could have been a fire person, it could have been an explorer, it could have been a doctor, or a veterinary surgeon, it could have been a zookeeper, it could have been a pilot, or wanting to fly and be a superhero. It could have been, as Derek was talking about last week, an astronaut who goes to the moon and travels around the moon, who sees the planets and sees the stars. But we can all relate to that feeling. Well, for these people, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, when God brought them out of captivity, well, they were like those who dreamed, and their dream came true. Their dream, they were free from literally being captured, from someone coming to their town and taking them away. They were free from that. Some of these people would have probably grown up in that environment. It would have been a dream to them. They wouldn't have known any other life or way, but they would have just been living in Babylon and probably hearing stories from their parents of what it was like when they were in Jerusalem. So when the Lord restored their fortunes, their dreams came true. And this is the kind of the poetic sense that this is set in, that they're set free, and they are, the writer is honouring God in this, in that God brought this restoration. So verse 2 continues to tell us a bit more about how they were feeling. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. They would have been celebrating, they would have been worshipping, they would have been praising God. This would have been an exciting time to be free, the possibility of what was to come, to return to Jerusalem, to rebuild. This would have been an exciting time, and it tells us something, a little bit of their heart at this time, and their spiritual life too. That their mouths were filled with laughter, their tongues with songs of joy, praising the Lord, worshipping the Lord in this positive and happy moment of their lives. I just want to read Luke 6 verses before verse 45 actually, where Jesus is speaking about a tree and its fruit, saying, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes, or grapes from briars. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks," which is a beautiful way to put it. Another way to put it is, for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. And here, their mouths are filled with laughter, and their tongues, songs of joy, because their heart is full of joy and zeal for God, who has set them free, who has given them new life and released them from captivity. So we learn something of their internal and personal state, and we learn about some of the way that God has restored them. Verse 2 continues to say, "Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them." So, both internally and personally, the Lord's brought restoration, He's brought them, but in an outward, visible sense, visible among the nations, people can see that God has brought brought his restoration and that God has brought his blessings, because the surrounding nations, the surrounding people are talking about it to say, wow, the Lord has blessed them, he's brought them out of captivity and done this thing. The Lord has done great things for them. For us, in our Christian lives, perhaps an example of this is baptism. When we are baptized, it's an internal and personal experience, a moment that we put into the water to symbolise being put to death and being raised to life in new life as we come out of the water. And it's something that we do to honour God and to show that we're a Christian. But it's also an outward, visible sign. It's something that's experienced communally with our own family, with Christians, with people, so that glory can be brought to God, so that the nations and the people can say, the Lord has done great things for them. They were this person who was doing this, who was behaving in this certain way, and now they're being baptized. God has done great things for them, their lives have changed, and they're moving forward, following Jesus in a new way. The Lord has done great things for them. So, God's restoration is personal and internal, but it's also visible in our lives. As we move from being sinners, and we're still sinners who repent in an ongoing way, but as we move from being under that weight and penalty of sin to being saved by grace and through faith in Jesus, we have that Christian experience, and we experience restoration in that God comes into our lives and our relationship with him that he intended us to have is restored, and we have that inward change as the Holy Spirit comes into our heart in that mysterious and wonderful way, and we move forward with God. Then, in a visible and ongoing way, we have this word sanctification, which essentially means the process of being more like Jesus in our lives. That's something that will happen till the day that we die, that change within us and that change in our lives. And outwardly things change, perhaps naturally, perhaps things fall away, bad habits or bad things that we were doing or whatever it was. Things will change in this visible way, and that will carry on until we pass away and until we go to be with Jesus, where we are fully sanctified, to use that word. And perhaps this process is our own kind of song of ascent. Perhaps our lives are song of ascent in that way, as we journey towards being with God eternally in that type of way. So, God's restoration is visible. Another example of this is in Acts 9, when Saul of Tarsus is persecuting Christians. He's really hunting them and tracking them down and heading up, following them and finding where they are. And he has this amazing revelation of the Lord appearing to him, and the Lord saying, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And in the end, Saul experiences this dramatic transformation in his life. So much so that people around are saying, isn't he Saul? Isn't he the guy who was persecuting Christians and tracking them down? Isn't he that same person? And God's restoration is visible in his life, because he's gone from someone who's persecuting Christians to someone who's preaching, who's praising Jesus, who's telling people about it. And he becomes Paul, who is really the rock of the church in that sense. He goes on to write many letters and many parts of our Bible today from that experience. One of these letters is to Timothy, who is someone he was encouraging and communicating with, and I want to read it to you. It says, I am reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. So, God's restoration is visible among the nations in our psalm that we're looking at today. Among the nations, people can see what God is doing, but also regionally, locally, in the sense of Paul communicating with Timothy, in the sense of our changed lives in our towns, in the places where we are, and also in our homes, in a real present way, in our family, in that type of way too. I'm sure that, I don't know who became a Christian first, from Lois, Eunice, on Timothy in this family, but I'm sure that the grandmother Lois, that her faith and witness would have had a big impact on Eunice, and vice versa. And I'm sure that Eunice and her life and her Christian witness would have also had an effect on Timothy, because they would have all seen each other. They're a family, and generationally they have this blessing that they're all Christians, and God's restoration is visible again in this type of sense. So, verse 3 of the psalm reads, "The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy." And the psalmist is honouring God once more, praising him. Now, this would be a great place to finish. This would be a great place to say, okay, that's great. The Lord restored us, we're praising him, we're thankful to him, and the Lord is great. And that's that. But life isn't so simple, and life is full of challenges, as we find out. Because in the next verse, the psalmist is saying, "Restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev." So the writer has gone from praising God and thanking him and experiencing the freedom from captivity and writing that about that, to now saying, "Restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev." So some context here of the streams in the Negev. This is the Negev desert in Israel. It's a barren, hot desert in the Middle East. I'm sure you can imagine for yourself a little bit about that. Most of the year it looks like this, but in the winter months it looks like this, because as the rain comes and as the rain season falls, the rain falls on the hard ground that's been made hard by the heat and the dryness. So very quickly and very suddenly the environment changes. So when the psalmist here is saying, "Restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev," they are asking for sudden change. They're saying, "Lord, turn this around quickly," like when the rain comes and we enjoy the water and the benefit. He's asking God for sudden change. He's asking God for perhaps miraculous change. I'm not sure what the situation was he was asking for, but he's asking for sudden change. Lord, restore our fortunes in this way. And we know that something has gone wrong, because it's going from praise and thanking God for restoration to asking God for restoration again. So something has gone wrong in this type of way from the beginning of the psalm. But you know, I'm so encouraged by this verse, and I just love this. I love the attitude of the person to once more turn to God. And this is faith in the hard times of life. This is faith and looking to Jesus, looking to God. We would look to Jesus, but the word here is Lord, Yahweh, which we would think of as the Father, perhaps. But looking to God in the midst of the trial, looking to God in the time where the stream is dry, when things are difficult, when things are tough, looking to God in the moments of life where we're waiting and hoping that he'll do something, saying, "Lord, change this around." And it's such an example to us that this is the heart and the approach of the writer, that they look to God in the difficult times, in the moment where you're thinking, I'm wondering perhaps where to go, the writer is looking to God in that type of moment. Derek very kindly summarised before a bit of the experience I've had at Bible College, and I've really been blessed by that and encouraged by that. And I thank you all for your encouragement here too, and your support in an ongoing way. It's been a great blessing and an exciting part of the journey. And I was there 2 weeks ago as well, and I wasn't staying at the college, I was staying in a place nearby. It was quite a rustic place. It was like a wooden type of, I won't call it a shack, but it was a wooden, it was something more than a shed, but it was a wooden building. I'm not sure if I can think of the right word, but it was very stripped back. It had a log fire, and it had a kettle on a stove, and I was very blessed to be there, but it was quite rustic, shall we say. And I was in a shower, having a shower, and the shower head fell off. Okay, it snapped off. It wasn't me who broke it. It fell off. I know that sounds like denial, but it's the truth. My Bible's there. It's the truth. I promise you. So I said to the host, I said, listen, the shower thing fell off this morning, and it was something she knew about. She said, okay, I'm going to order a new one. Do you want some tape in the meantime? So I said, okay, yeah, I'll have some tape. And I did. I ended up cutting a shopping bag, a bag for life, wrapping it round and then putting this tape on, and it didn't work. It was sprayed out in all different directions the next day. But she did come along and bring a full shower head with the tail on to just reattach. And I said to her, I looked at it and said, oh, I'll just do it. And she said, are you sure? I said, yeah, no worries, I'll do it for you. Thinking, okay, this is good, I'll just do it. It won't be so hard. I'll just screw it on. Well, you can see where this is going. That wasn't the case. I came to the shower and
Forgot to turn the water off.
they forgot to turn the water off. No, not quite, but a good guess, Rob. So there's a wooden box that's covering where the wire goes into, and it's covering my access to be able to change the shower head with its tail. So I look at that and think, okay, I need to remove this wooden box. How can I do this? So I start looking around for things. So get my key, trying to unscrew the screws with my keys, trying to find things, bit of plastic, trying to do. And in the end, I found that if I used the nib of a pen lid, I could use it as a screwdriver to undo the wood. Okay? And I removed this box off the shelf thing. The 4 screws hold it on, and underneath it is more wood, pipes in the way, no way for me to get in. And in the end I thought, do you know what? There's no chance here of me fixing this. So got my pen lid, started screwing it back on and reattached it and left the lady to fix the problem. But this is not the approach, and you're wondering, how has this got to do with the psalm? Because I didn't have the right tool or the right option for the job, but the psalmist's approach is different. He looks to the Lord straight away. The writer says, restore our fortunes, Lord. He knows where to go. The writer knows where to go. Not to try and muddle through things themselves, but to go to the place where real change can happen, to go to the place where there's power, where there's transformation, and where there's been restoration in the past. And I will just add on the end of that to say prayer is relational. We don't just go to God when we need something. It's about when it's ongoing to live out our faith, live out our prayer life. So I'm not suggesting that God is some toolbox to answer our every need, but I'm just saying that the person writing knows where to go and knows what they need. They need the Lord. So, as Christians, we would believe that we're restored, that we've experienced restoration. Sorry about that colour. That hasn't come out so well. I'll make sure to read it to you. We become a Christian. Our soul is saved. That's what we believe as Christians. We believe that our eternal destination changes. We believe that we are going to heaven to be with the Lord, to be in glory with Him, as opposed to being eternally separated from God, which is the other side of things. But we believe that we're going to heaven. We believe that we receive the Holy Spirit to help us and equip us, to prompt us, to help us experience the fullness of Christian life, to give us peace and power, to be a comforter and advocate, and to equip us as we're on the journey. We experience freedom, and just like the restored fortunes of those who are freed, we can relate to that, because we too feel we are captives freed. We're free from the power of sin in our lives to move forward with Christ in a new way. Though, just like restoration is still needed for the writer of the psalm, for us too, restoration is still needed in our lives. Perhaps our language is an example of this. If someone has been not a Christian for 40 years of their life, and then they become a Christian and make the decision, I want to move forward with God. I believe that Jesus died for me on the cross, and today I'm putting my trust in you. Jesus, if you're real, come into my life, show me. They make that commitment. Though, when they walk out of church, they've had a lifetime of bad language, and that might not change straight away. Sometimes things take time, and restoration is ongoing in areas of our life that perhaps the Lord shines a light upon or chips away. I always like this metaphor of, the artist in ancient Greece that has a big block of rock, and he's chipping off little bits. And I think that's a little bit like the Christian life, where God is chipping off little bits of the parts of us that aren't so holy. And restoration is still needed in our response to things in the world, to the challenges we see, because things go wrong. Shower heads fall off showers, and the tail starts spluttering water all around while you're trying to get ready in the morning. We might drop a plate, drop a mug. I know we might stand on a piece of Lego. I know that these are specific examples, but you will know in your life that things go wrong, and we need to be experiencing that ongoing restoration as God works in our lives, as the Holy Spirit works in our lives to guide us and shape us, and as God smooths the rough edges of the statues that we are. Hopefully we're not statues, but you know what I mean. Another example of this type of theory is that Israel, though freed from Egypt when they were freed, they still had the journey through the wilderness. God had freed them from captivity. He'd done an amazing thing in their life, but they still had that journey of going through the wilderness. For the captives, when they're freed from Babylon, as we're looking at in this psalm, they returned home, but they were met with ruins. Jerusalem had been besieged. They'd been gone for 70 years. Can you imagine, in fact imagine now, someone comes and takes you from your house and you don't go back to your home for 70 years. Can you imagine how much ironing that you would have to do when you got back? Can you imagine the state of the place? It would be cobwebs, it would be in ruins, it would be, things everywhere. It would not be in a good condition. And that's our homes today. Can you imagine for them going back? They were people who lived off the land, who grew crops, who relied on specific ways for food. So for them to return home when the farmland hasn't been taken care of, when their perhaps food storage pots are in disrepair, it would have been a massive challenge. And though God has restored them and they've had that experience, it's still ongoing in that type of way. And it's the same for us. We're saved by the grace of God, by God's kindness in wanting to restore us, and our faith in Jesus, our faith in that moment. But still, we are works in progress. All of us are works in progress. Life is still full of challenges, and we have to, in an ongoing way, keep on asking God, Lord, restore this situation. Give me strength in this situation. Guide me and help me to be the man or the woman of God that you want me to be. We get to verse 5, and this is where we have a real encouragement, because we read these words, "Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy." And it's very poetic language, but saying those who go out and sow the seed in the time of difficulty, when it comes to the time of harvest, they will reap the rewards. They will reap the harvest and the joy. Those who persevere in that difficult time will reap with songs of joy. Sowing seed is done seasonally at specific times of the year. And reaping and bringing in the crops, bringing in the harvest, bringing in the food is done in a different season. And I think there's something in that for us in our lives. Perhaps some moments are for weeping, perhaps some moments are for joy. Perhaps we think of the verse in Ecclesiastes when it says there's a time for all things, there's a time for, and it works through those different things that there are a time for. I think our part, perhaps, in the Christian life, our challenge is the faith in between. In between the sowing, in between the hard time, and in between the reaping and the fruit. Living out our faith in that way. So I want to say, and I want to encourage you this morning and say, keep on praying. Keep on praying. Keep on asking God to move in a wonderful way. He's a God who delights to answer our prayers. He doesn't answer every prayer immediately or in a way that we expect, but keep on praying, keep on believing, as we had the example of Jill, who's not here with us today, but while those people were out going door to door, she was here praying on her own, praying, Lord, I pray for opportunities, and it sounds from the good reports that those prayers were answered. But keep on going in your situation, persevere, and keep on trusting in the Lord and looking to Him for strength. Ask and you will receive, seek and you will find. Keep on going, persevere in your situation when you're met with challenges, and keep the faith in between the sowing and the reaping, which is the challenge and the exciting part of the journey for us with Jesus soon. We, as Christian people, have always got that assurance that we are restored. Jesus died on the cross for us, and nothing, any situation can ever change that, can ever change His love for you, His grace for you, His mercy for you. Jesus, He loves you and He died for you to bear the weight of your sins. And though the sowing and the times can be difficult, we can always come back to the cross for forgiveness, or to be reminded of God's goodness, of God's power, that He has risen in that type of way. Finally, in this last verse 6 here, it reads, "Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them." And it kind of repeats that message It cements that message from verse 5, and saying that those who go out carrying seed to sow. This is not easy, by the way. This is hard work here. Clearing, cleaning, preparing the land ready for the seeds, getting everything ready. Actually going out and sowing the seeds is difficult, it's physical labour to go and do it. The knowledge is needed of when to go and do it at the right time. Threshing or winnowing, these are new words to me that I now know the definition of. Threshing is hitting the crops with a stick, basically. And winnowing is stamping on the crops. I'm now an expert on farming thanks to this week of thinking about farming. Seeping. So before the seeds would be planted, it was a practice in the ancient part of the world, and again it is believed that this is a practice of Hebrew farmers, ancient Hebrew farmers, Jewish farmers, though there's no reference to it biblically, but it's believed, it's a historical thing, that they would put the seeds in water to activate them, to help them germinate, to help the crop to be flourish. And I think there's something in this too of preparation and being prepared for the things that are to come, being prepared for the harvest. And perhaps at the time, if you saw those seeds, they'd be wet, they might be damaged, but actually something has gone on to prepare them for the fruit that is to come. It would have involved waiting. As I mentioned, it's a seasonal aspect of sowing and then reaping the harvest with time in between. So this would have included waiting, which is not an easy thing. And then the harvesting itself, though joyful and exciting to reap the reward of the food, is a challenge too, because it's physical to go out with different tools. They wouldn't quite have had a combine harvester in those days. They would have had to do it by hand with a sheaf or some other type of tool. So, I want to finish with this thought. Trust the process. Trust the process. Trust that God is working. Trust that God is moving. Trust that the God who restored the captives to Zion is also in the midst of the sowing, in tears and in sorrow, and is faithful once more during the harvest. God's faithfulness doesn't change there, but perhaps the experience of the psalmist does, and their position does, but God's faithfulness remains the same. And look to the Lord. Look to the Lord, the maker of the heavens. For it is written that the person will return, not might return with a harvest, not maybe if the harvest is well, will return with songs of joy. And in that sense, nothing is wasted. Those tears, that time that God will see of us honouring Him and praising Him, He will see, and we can return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves of wheat, a plentiful harvest, not just a strand of wheat, but multiple sheaves of wheat, bringing them back in. So let me invite the worship team back up to the stage, the platform, and I will pray for us as